All right, well, today we're talking about effective meetings, and especially when you aren't the chair or the leader of the meeting, because you can sometimes feel like you're being held captive. So the purpose today is that we want to learn ways to maximize our productivity when it comes to meetings, and also to gain tips for improving meetings when you're not at the chair and you're just an attendee, because more and more emphasis is being placed on teamwork and partnerships and collaborations, which means more of our time is spent in meetings. Our agenda today will be covering if you should attend the meeting. We'll talk about tasks and attitudes and behaviors when you are attending, how you can assist the chair and other attendees, and then recap and some next steps. So the sometimes dreaded meeting request. And the first thing you should do when you get a meeting request is to assess the request. Who is it coming from? Is the meeting optional? Is it the best use of your time? Are you the best attendee to participate at the meeting? And you may be wondering, how can you think through these things? How do you know what may happen, or how do you know how to answer these questions? Well, the key is to ask the meeting organizer, what is the meeting's purpose? And why are they calling the meeting? And do they have an agenda put together? And they may not, right, when they make the meeting request, but at least they can tell you, or should be able to tell you, what the purpose is for the meeting. If you'll notice, when I started this presentation, I started with the purpose of the webinar and then an agenda. So you have an idea, do I want to continue on this webinar for the next half hour, or are there other things that are better use of my time? So as you ask yourself those questions and you analyze the agenda or the purpose, you can decide, are you in or are you out? And if you're in, well, stay tuned for another 25 minutes, and hopefully you'll gain some value. And if you're out, then you can save this webinar as a future reference, assuming the recording goes right. So there are 3 P's to be for meetings. I know, pretty creative, huh? Anyway, you want to be prepared. You need to be present, and I don't just mean physically, and be participatory. So be prepared. If you didn't get an agenda already, ask for an agenda, and ask for it in advance so that you can look through the agenda and think of what are some of the things that may come up during the meeting, what are some of the things that I may be able to do or you may be able to do in preparation for the meeting and that could add value during the meeting or to the meeting, and even ask the meeting organizer, you know, if they have suggestions, is there something I should prepare for or bring? And especially if this is a meeting that's not a typical every week meeting, or if it's a meeting with partners and whatnot, if they request a meeting, sometimes it's just nice to say, what can I be prepared for? Or at least they know that you are putting intentionality behind your decision to attend the meeting and that you will show up and be ready and be prepared. Being present is probably one of the hardest things that we do in our daily lives, and especially when it comes to meetings. And instead of thinking of it as a meeting, you need to shift your mindset to, this is an opportunity to move your work, your organization's work, and this group of people, their work forward. And so you want to clear your mind so that you can focus on the meeting objectives. You want to try to put away all your due dates, other things that you're working on, and just focus on why you're at that meeting and what the purpose is for the meeting. Keep focusing on the meeting objectives. And set aside your devices, if at all possible. Cell phone, not visible. If you're taking notes on your computer or your laptop, fine, but try to close your email, things like that. Just do whatever you can, and you know how to manage this for yourself, but try to reduce your distractions. And if it's in a meeting where you may not know everyone, or you're not sure if other people around the table know everyone, ask for introductions. Ask if the chair gets started with the meeting. Don't do introductions. Raise your hand and ask if everyone could introduce themselves. And then a big tip is focus on the person speaking. That will help you stay focused. It will help you stay present. And especially when you're going through introductions, focus on the person that is speaking and introducing themselves, because they may be someone you want to follow up with after the meeting for a different topic. And so this is also a chance to network, which I'll talk about later on. And then be participatory. You want to come with pure motives. You have decided that you would attend this meeting, and the reason you're attending the meeting is in good faith that you're there to help the group move its work forward. And it should be in alignment with your own work to move it forward, because if not, you need to go back and reassess really why you're at the meeting and if you're the right person from your team to be at the meeting. Recently, I gave a presentation at a Rotary Club in Marquette, and they talked about their four things of truth, and I really like that. And it's, think of Rotary before speaking, and if you can see that on your screen, it talks about the four-way test. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? And will it be beneficial to all concerned? So part of that, will it be beneficial, is the things that you're going to say, is it on topic? Or are you throwing in your own agenda and taking the discussion elsewhere where it's not supposed to go for that meeting? Obviously, if you have knowledge, share. Even if you see something that may seem obvious to you, it may not be to others. So go ahead and offer up the information or whatever your thoughts are, because again, you want to participate in the meeting, not just sit there. And really try to listen to understand. And recently I was in a meeting and I heard an attendee say something, and the chair started to answer in a completely different way than what I heard the attendee asking. And the chair was also, you could tell, starting to get a little defensive or frustrated. And so I held up my hand and I said, wait, I said, actually what I heard that person say is XYZ. And the attendee said, yeah, what I mean. And the chair was able to back up and be like, oh, okay. And I think it was an issue that the chair kind of had a burr under their saddle, so to speak, already. And so that's what they heard the attendee say, even though that's completely not what the attendee meant. And so being able to intervene like that, because you listen to try to understand what they're saying and not necessarily, oh, they didn't use correct grammar there, those types of things. So really try to seek to understand. And, be cognizant of your own body language and facial expressions. Sometimes that's hard, but you don't want to be poker face, because that can be really hard for the person facilitating the meeting to generate the necessary energy to have good ideas, good discussion. So you don't want to be poker face, but you also don't want to be rolling your eyes the whole time, because, again, that would also frustrate your other team members that are around the table at that meeting. Now I've been reading a great book on how to make meetings work, and it's not rocket science, but it's actually very interesting. And so that's why I said, it's kind of meeting hieroglyphics, because when I say this, you'll probably think, duh, but it's not something we think about actively on a daily basis. And so if you look at the one on the left, this is what's called the multi-headed animal syndrome. And if you think about it, when you're in a meeting, there are many different people with different agendas, different backgrounds, different experiences, different goals that are all at that meeting. So the key is to be conscientious, to appreciate everyone's differences and their backgrounds and experiences, and leverage those for the purpose of the meeting. And so whether you're the chair or the facilitator or you're an attendee, you always want to have that in your mind that, okay, we're here to leverage this group to move this work forward, whatever that purpose is for that meeting. when you take that into consideration, it really helps that to not get as defensive or frustrated, or it's okay, I'm trying to understand you and where you're coming from, and how can we use what you think to help move the meeting forward. And if it just seems completely off topic, which we've had that happen before, I'll have tips to help you there as well. Another thing to keep in mind is that with every meeting, especially the chair needs to keep these dual constructs in mind. You have two things for an effective meeting. The chair especially always has to focus on two things at once. One is the content. That is the agenda items, the topics, the discussion. That is the what. And then you have the process, which is the how. Are we brainstorming? Are we trying to come to a consensus? Are we information sharing? And so at all times, everyone at the table should understand what the content is, in other words, what you're talking about, and what the process is. In other words, how are you planning to talk about this, or how are you talking about this topic, and what do you hopefully plan to gain from this topic? Are you trying to make a decision? Are you simply sharing information? Are you brainstorming? You know, those types of things. Now, I've created two slides based on those constructs because when I was thinking about my personal pet peeves, and then I was reading some others, it really came down to not keeping in mind those two hieroglyphics, either the multi-animals or the process. So this first one is, I call it graciously assisting the circus, because it's the multi-animal syndrome. And you have the multi-group all pulling in their own directions, which is not efficient. I also underlined graciously because in a meeting, really trying to make a meeting work means you're being a team player, no matter if you are the CEO and the chair, or if you're the grassroots employee that's really working with customers, and anyone across the scope. When you're in a team meeting, you're all on the same level, or when you're in a meeting, you all have one vote, you all have one voice. And so it's not the time to pull ego. It's not the time to try to one-up someone. It's time to be humble and gracious, because we've all had to learn how to chair, and we're meetings, and we also need to remember that we're still learning how to hold effective meetings, because we're all people and the dynamics are continually changing. So here's one. Let's say someone's getting into a heated discussion, or several people are getting into a heated discussion, and it just seems like it won't end, and the chair is letting it continue. Then you can say, you know, let's take it, come back and discuss this issue. Simple, and probably that 10 minutes spent on a break can propel you much further than continuing to be in the heated discussion. Another thing is, if the chair isn't experienced with making sure everyone around the table is participating, it would be good for you to keep an eye on one that has not said something, but you can or just jumping into the conversation. You can ask them to share his or her thoughts. Many times people that are introverts or that are slower to speak up, they have really great opinions and really good thoughts that need to be shared. Let's say it's just in general chaotic. You have too many people talking at once. The process is starting to get confused. You could just say, you know, you can even call it out, name it, what's going on. Name, don't lay blame, but name it. There are two, Mr. or Mrs. Chair, let's all agree to who wants to go first, whatever's appropriate for the meeting that you're in. Or off topic. You know, you've been in those meetings where you're trying to discuss issue A, and Mrs. Parakeet keeps coming up with issue B and keeps saying, well, what about this? what about this? What about this? And you can either sit there and continue to be annoyed because the chair isn't addressing Mrs. Parakeet, or you can, um, you know, ask to, you can gain attention or gain the floor and say, Mrs. Parakeet, may we record your point? We hear what you're saying. We understand this, and we can take it to the committee for a follow-up. And then that should help Mrs. Parakeet feel like, okay, I've been heard. They understand what I'm trying to say, and I don't need to, hopefully. And then another one is the random issues, and I kind of think of rabbits, how they just hop all over randomly, so then you can say, Mr. Rabbit, we agreed to discuss XYZ. This is the topic we're on for the agenda. And while what you're saying, I'm sure, is important, please ask the board to put it on a future agenda item. We just don't have the time tonight to discuss it. Or if it's time sensitive, which last minute time sensitive things are kind of a pet peeve of mine, because was it poor planning on that person's part? And even if it was, you don't want to be completely punitive, because it may be a good item of business. So in that case, the chair should handle it in asking everyone, are you okay if we add this to the end of the agenda and talk about it if we have time or whatnot? If the chair doesn't do that, then that's a place where you could step up and say, okay, is it okay with the group if we discuss this, if we have time at the end of the meeting? So that's it's to help everyone be heard, but not let them get the meeting off track from its original purpose. And then also specifically assisting the chair, and why this is talking about assisting the chair in particular is because the chair is the one that really needs to manage the process. Remember, the chair especially is always looking at the process and the content. However, some chairs may not be educated in this, or they may just be learning, and so it's still okay to assist the chair even though it's a process issue. Maybe you've had examples where you're in a meeting and it just seems like suddenly you have no idea what people are talking about, or it feels like you're completely off topic, or you thought you were trying to brainstorm to come up with ideas for a new event, and some other people are talking about, why these ideas will or won't work, or, oh yeah, we did that in the past, and remember how we did this event, and yeah, we raised a lot of money, and the next thing you know, you have people reliving history instead of continuing to brainstorm ideas for your new event. And so you can my example here is, are we sharing knowledge, or are we brainstorming for potential solutions? And if you just read this on the screen, it probably sounds like a real smart aleck question. And so I want you to know my intent isn't to do that. And in the situation itself, you'll really need to think about, okay, how do I word this where it doesn't sound like smart aleck? And maybe you just say, I'm confused. What's our purpose here for this? And then another one is when you're trying to come to a consensus and the chair hasn't laid out a good process for how to drive the group to consensus. And if you have an idea, then you can just say, may I suggest a process for resolving this? And actually the chair would probably be very grateful if you were in that situation and you did that. Another one, and especially my pet peeve, is are meetings that don't end on time. To me, I think that is the rudest thing, because I usually schedule my next meeting, or I have somewhere else to go. And if I have to leave a meeting that was supposed to end on time and didn't, then I'm also real frustrated that I missed part of that meeting. And so if you're a chair, please be very cognizant of the time. And if you aren't, you can try to keep the meeting flowing by doing, pointing out a point in time. If we plan to complete the agenda, Mr. Chair, we need to move on. And so again, it's not laying blame to anyone, it's pointing to the agenda and having people look at the agenda, not look at the chair and say, hey, you know, this meeting's really falling apart, you need to do something. But it's really just calling out the time, helping people be sensitive to the fact that you need to move on or table some items until the next meeting. And then another one is people that flip-flop. Your attendees that flip-flop their decisions, or even the chair may flip-flop. What I mean is you made a decision and now they're starting to second guess. And so you can, or the chair, you know, you can say, we decided to XYZ earlier in the meeting and we had robust discussion and this decision was made. You can say, does anyone have new information that may make it necessary to revisit our decision? And if not, then let's, if you know no one does, and say, let's move on. Let's be a culture where we discuss, decide, and support, and then move on. However, if someone somehow came up with new information from the time you made the decision to later in the meeting, that may happen, and so it would be good to gather that new information. You don't want to be so rigid that you don't make the best decision in the moment when you could have. But most of the time, it's people second guessing. And then if the agenda item seems random, let's say you're having a meeting again about planning a fundraising event, and then on the agenda, it's also talking about your fall appeal letter. And it's like, you know what, we're here for this one thing. We're here for planning the event. Don't tack on other areas of business that may seem random. So it's always best to, instead of assume that it's random, to ask the person organizing the meeting, okay, what's the purpose for this agenda item? Because it just doesn't seem to fit. And then when they explain it, you may realize it really does fit, or maybe it doesn't, and you can ask if they could hold that for a different meeting. So now, strong endings, and I keep watching the time to make sure I don't end late after so vehemently speaking about that being my pet peeve. Strong endings, and this is also important. You want to walk away, and you want everyone else around the table to walk away feeling good about the meeting and that something was accomplished. So you want to ask the chair to recap, if they don't already, recap the meeting and reinforce the decisions made. And I wouldn't word it in that way, say, Mr. Chair, recap the meeting for us. But I would just say, okay, help me remember what action did we take? What decisions did we make? What were the key themes in this meeting? And then what are the next steps? And who's responsible for those next steps? Because then not only does it solidify it in your mind, but in everyone else, and it helps drive a culture of accountability and that the meeting was worthwhile and important for people to attend because things got done during the meeting and will get done in between meetings with the follow-up work. You also want to keep your own notes. And I'm not necessarily, for people that just don't like taking notes, I'm not necessarily saying you need to take notes on everything that happens during the meeting, but some of the time you may say, oh, so-and-so was discussing this, and that's not related to this meeting whatsoever, but I want to follow up with them about that. So you want to make sure that you have pen and paper so you can jot it down and then go back to being present. And same with, there's many times, I admit, many times I'm sitting in a meeting and I'm thinking, you know what, I forgot XYZ. So it's like, oh, I forgot to mail my mom's birthday card. Well, if I don't just jot that down quickly, it's going to stay on my mind and it's going to distract me from being present. So I just write it down quickly, and then I can go back to being present in the meeting. So that's another reason to have your own little notepad or something while you're at meetings. And then along the lines that I was just saying is take the opportunity to network, especially if it's a coalition meeting or a partner meeting, something that's outside of your normal construct of the normal people that you work with, because that's where you can learn what other people are doing. You can learn potential opportunities to work together. You can hear new ideas. It just really, it's amazing the things that you can learn just by attending a meeting that can also help drive your business forward based on who attends and kind of what they mentioned during the meeting. And even if it's a longer meeting and there are breaks, learning, so tell me more about what you were saying on this new program that you're doing. How did you hear about it? Why did you decide to launch it? Whatever situation may come up, that's a great opportunity to network and helps you take advantage of being in a meeting so it doesn't feel like you're wasting your time, but really you're continuing to move your work forward. And so with that, I will recap. Basically, we talked about thinking of meetings as far as advancing your work, and does it make sense for you to attend? Don't attend automatically just because you got the meeting request. So think about if you should attend or not, and then if you do, think about the 3 B's for the P. Be participatory, be prepared, and be present. And then also, it's okay during a meeting to graciously self-correct or assist the chair or other attendees so that you get the most bang for your buck out of the meeting. Not just you personally, but the purposes and the objectives of the meeting are upheld. And with that, I have about 15 seconds left. So I just want to say thank you so much for attending. If you have questions, here's my contact information. And again, there are many resources that deal with effective meetings, and especially when it comes to an effective chair. And so that's why our next meeting will be in the chair. How are you to be a good chair, and how can you help, how are you going to lead a meeting very well, and how do you improve your skills as a chairperson, as a facilitator, so that you can hold effective meetings. And that will be in September. And Victoria, if you're still on, would you give me the exact date, because I already forgot. But it will be in September. You should get emails on it.
Yep, we
What's
have
the date?
that one scheduled for September 21st, and we also have on August 31st. It's still in its formation phase, so I'm not exactly sure what will be covered in it, but it's going to be an overview of skills needed for first-time managers. And we've been getting a lot of feedback that that's a topic people would like to see covered. So if you're a first-time manager, or you have employees that are first-time managers and you're seeing some things that you'd like to be addressed, please feel free to reach out to us and we will build that into the presentation. So mark that on your calendars, August 31st. It's a Wednesday, will be the First Time Managers webinar. And then Wednesday, September 21st, will be chairing meetings.
Excellent. So you should receive emails on that. Be sure to forward the chair email to anyone you know that is a chair or that leads meetings, and try to get them to this webinar. And also, if you know someone that's a first-time manager, or if you are, we hope you join us in August. So again, thank you. And later this afternoon or tomorrow, you'll receive a link for a survey, and we always love your feedback. We want to hear what you want to learn. We want to hear what was valuable about this one, what I could have done better, those types of things, because we're here to help you do what you do better, because your work in the nonprofit world is so very important. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day.